Welcome back. I'm John with Vistas and Solutions, here today to talk to you a little bit about debugging, troubleshooting, and overall checking on how your policy is doing. So from videos up until now, we've essentially worked with sunny day conditions. So the policies are going to work, the assertions, if they do fail, are going to fail in a way that we can show you what's going on, but that's not always what happens in the real world. And so what I have for you today is a test that I created. I modified the policy logic test that we showed in one of our previous videos to just do a simple comparison for an AND. So we are going to look for term 1, term 2. If they are both equal to true, we are going to send a response back that says term 1 and term 2 and true. So this should be pretty familiar for anyone who's been watching our previous videos. And we'll just refresh this and we'll see we've got true, true, true. So again, this is a sunny day scenario with terms that we see, variables that we can maintain and modify as we need. But what happens if these two terms are different values? What happens if they are the result of different assertions earlier on in our policy? If they're more complex than just comparing two simple things together, we can run into issues. So let's simulate that. So we're going to save and activate. And like we saw in one of our previous videos, you're going to get this policy falsified SOAP fault. Pretty common to see throughout the gateway if there are any issues with your policy. So today, I'm going to show you 3 ways to look at these files, and to look at what's going on, and to troubleshoot and decode, and hopefully even fix what's going on. So we're going to start off by looking at something that I use often. That's the Policy Manager Dashboard. So we're going to find that in the View menu, scroll down to Dashboard, and what appears is one of the more powerful tools on the gateway. This is a very quick look at all the traffic that's going on the gateway at any point in time. And so we're going to do a quick overview on what you're seeing and what this all means. So we'll go from the top with our service metrics. There's a service metrics and a cluster status. This is where you can see all of the nodes that are on your cluster. You can see how long they've been up. You can see any sort of service statistics. This can be whether the services have failures, violations, or successes, and then how many successes they've had in the last minute. So we can see right now we've done about 1.7 million successes on the gateway, and because we use this a lot for testing and for validation and verification, we've had over 700,000 failures. So pretty normal for a gateway that's purpose is to test things, build things, function a lot like that. So getting back to our service metrics, we can limit this dashboard based on specific nodes, or we can see the entire cluster. Since there's only one node in this cluster, it doesn't make sense for us to change it, but we have the ability to do that. We also have the ability to look at any single endpoint that is on our gateway. So this is all the endpoints that you see over here, and there's some other ones that are a little more hidden, but typically with our OAuth or our OTK, they've been created for us. So we have the ability to filter this either by node or by service. We also have the ability to look at different time slices. So you'll notice here, this is the default. The resolution is 5 seconds, so each one of these columns is going to be 5 seconds of policy, or 5 seconds of activity in the gateway. So we can see here, this time slice, we had 2 requests. Pretty easy. We'll see what this looks like in a different visualization. So right here, you can see 10 minutes of data. If we bring this to an hourly view, each column is going to be an hour. And so from this view, we can see 2 days of data. we can go back one step further into daily view, and sometimes we have redraw errors. There we go. And so now we can see, let's refresh that, we can see 60 days of data. So after this, if you were trying to find something that is more than 2 months in the past, you are going to have to use a different method to look at what happened in your gateway. So just from here, since we've got kind of all the colors expressed, green is good, as you would expect. That is a policy success. You can kind of see the legend here and what each of these values would give you. So green is success, yellow is policy violation, that's what we saw here, and then red is routing failure. So that's if we were unable to reach out to the gateway or to reach out to a third party or another service. So that's what we'll get. Sometimes if you have a routing failure, depending on how you've configured your routing assertions, they may show up as yellow. So just be warned, pretty much anything that's not green, you should go take a look at. On the top here, you see everything as expressed is response times. So the gateway wants to perform as low latency, high performance as possible. What that means is we are going to be measuring latency, and the gateway takes a very active approach to measuring that latency and ensuring that everyone can see what's going on. So there's 2 latency metrics that the gateway monitors and maintains for every single policy, and that is the front-end response and the back-end response. So front-end response is the total time that a policy takes to complete. So from the second, really the microsecond that the gateway starts a policy to the microsecond that it ends and sends a response back to the user. That's a measure of latency. The back end is any sort of external routing that needs to happen and the latency done there. So if you were waiting for a back-end service, if you were waiting for something else to come back, that's what's going to start kicking in this back-end latency. The easiest way to measure the gateway's latency is just subtract these 2 numbers. So in this case, we're looking at 33 milliseconds as the max response. Average is right around 6 milliseconds, and the low is 1 millisecond. It's pretty simple, kind of makes sense. The front end minus the back end is the internal gateway operation latency. So let's go back into our fine view. What I want to do is, we had this error here, so the policy falsified will always give you yellow. We're going to kick this off again so you can see a fresh error. And already we've got the ability to dive in and get a little bit more information. So because I go way too fast, what I did was I was on this column and I right-clicked Show Audit Events. You'll see there's also a yellow dot here. If this is difficult to access, if there's a lot of requests and maybe just one policy violation, so this is going to be a primarily green bar with just a little bit of yellow at the top, this is a much easier target to get the same effect. So window comes up and you'll see this is a gateway audit events. Audit is going to be important later on, so just kind of put that away for a second. What we're looking at is specifically for the error that or the endpoint that we hit. We don't see anything in here. So we see there's 4 total requests, 3 success and 1 violation. When we come in here, we're only seeing the 3 success. We're not seeing the violation at all. So when we were talking earlier, we said this is gateway audit events. We need to add auditing into this policy that we created. So let's go do that. So the policy assertion to add audit details is pretty simple. We'll go up into our search bar, we'll hit audit messages in policy, and we'll just drag that over. You can technically put this anywhere in the policy. I have found it to be best practice, and it makes a little bit more sense if you just put it at the top. So that's why everyone knows where it's going to be. Broadcom will recommend that you limit the auditing that you're doing, and we'll go into custom auditing and how we can show what's going on here. So we've got audit messages and policy. We hit save and activate. Let's go back to our dashboard. Now again, we haven't fixed anything. So if we hit this again, it will still fail. We will get that error bar. But now we have a little bit more information about what's going on. So now that we have a little bit more information about what's going on, we can see a little more detail. We see here, there's policy evaluation for service broken test, which is this name. Assertion falsified, resulted in status 600. That gives us some information, but that doesn't give us a ton of information. So if you are going to use the Policy Manager Dashboard and audit events to debug services, you'll want to add in a little bit more information. We're going to do that through add audit details. Now, before we said audit messages and policy can be anywhere in the policy and it will work just the same. This has got to be a little bit more thought out. So let's put a little bit of debugging in here, term 2, and this is just text, just plain text. So we're saying term 1, we're going to reference term 1, term 2, we're going to reference term 2. So we'll put this at the bottom, save and activate. Let's run this again. So again, we didn't fix anything, but we gave ourselves a little bit more information. So here's the latest error that came in. Now look at this. We don't have any more information. So what happened here? When we're looking at this policy, now you may already know what's happening here. We're looking for term 1 and term 2 to be equal to true, which isn't happening here. What's going on is this comparison is going to pass. Term 1 equals true, so we pass here. This comparison, term 2 equals true, is going to evaluate to false, which then evaluates this folder to false, which stops all processing. So we never get to this add audit details. So you want to be, again, a little bit more careful about where you're putting audit messages. So let's move this up above our comparison. We'll save and activate. And let's try this again. So still the same error, but now we will see that we have a little bit more information in this audit detail. So now we have term 1 true, term 2 is false. So we have that information. We combine that with a little bit of logic that we understand from how to think in policy and the different folders and operations that we need to obtain to get a true or get a policy that validates all the way through. Now we can use some common sense and think about what's going on. It is good to know that these are all time-stamped, so every assertion, every audit is time-stamped in the gateway. This is also present in the database, and we won't go into the database to show this information, but we will show it where it can exist in other locations. So now we understand that term 1, term 2, we can get out a little bit more information. With our understanding of the policy, we can understand that this response isn't coming back because term 2 is equal to true, or it's not equal to true. And so if we change this to true, and refresh, we'll get our information back. We'll also see in here that we no longer have that yellow bar that appears. It's just green from now on. And if we want, we can even go into the audit results and see that the broken test passed successfully. We didn't get the 600 message false or policy falsified, just came through as it would. We can even come in here, look at the details, see the response status, see how long it took. You can get various information about the message itself. So that's one way to do this. And I realize we took 15 minutes just to show the one way we can do this. Let's talk about another way. I said we're going to show three. We're going to show three. Let's bring this back to false so we can break this again. All right, so let's save and activate first. All right, back to a SOAP fault. So just under the dashboard, we have the ability to view the logs. Now, the logs that you see here are slightly customized, but primarily this is what you would see when you start up a gateway. So the default pattern is going to be SSG underscore number underscore number. So you'll see this, it's a 10 log file rotation that I've got set up. So it's going to go through 0 to 9. We can click on SSG00, which is always going to be the latest log file. Everything else just gets moved down. And we can look at various information that's coming through. Now, if you remember what we saw on the audit events, you'll see some very similar formatting. And that's essentially what we're looking at here. So we can come in and we can see information about every single endpoint that the gateway is being used. Let's bring that up really fast. And now we can see that we have some audit detail assertions. So we can actually come in and see message term 1 true, term 2 false. We get a lot more information about everything else that's going on with this. This is essentially the same thing you would see in the dashboard audit viewer, just in a different way. There is some extra metadata that you will see in here that you wouldn't necessarily see in the audit viewer, but I haven't found it really to be much help in debugging cases. We'll talk when we go through OpenTelemetry and gateway observability. We'll see how we can use this a little bit better. I also want to note there is a very strong possibility that if you are looking at logs on your gateway, you will see these as XML files, not as JSON. There is a cluster-wide property that allows you to push these into JSON format as opposed to XML format. So it's something that works better for me and the log aggregation that I'm doing. Your mileage may vary. I also feel that JSON's just easier to read. So at any rate, we have the ability to look at logs. Now, I will say the trouble here is that these log files are just streamed from the gateway. So if you have a long policy that's doing lots of different things, it is possible that other policies are writing to this file in between your transactions. So you have the ability to filter in here. This will take regular expressions. You can do some tweaking around to get what you need. Just be aware that this is a very much a living document. I would say looking at the log files, especially if you are performing that from the gateway, is probably one of the more difficult ways to debug and troubleshoot a policy, but it is a way. The last one I wanted to talk about is the ability to run a just-in-time debugger. So when we talked about the dashboard and the log files, those are evaluating policies that have already happened. So this is where you can look at things that have happened 10 minutes in the past, 5 hours in the past, 50 days in the past. Your log files can show you even more data. We can look back to, as long as your log files haven't rolled, you can look back to the beginning of your gateway. So there are some advantages to that type of troubleshooting and lookup. the service debugger is going to be the most real time that you can get. So instead of going up into view, we are actually going to right click on the policy itself and scroll down to the service debugger. So this is going to open up a window. You'll see it is a spitting image of the policy we have, and this is why it is so important to have assertion numbers in your policy as well as in your debugger. So back when we talked about policy manager best practices, I said you should always have assertion numbers. This is the reason. The service debugger always has assertion numbers, and so if you have a very long policy, it's really nice to be able to reference which assertion is causing you issues, and we're going to see that in a second here. So anyone who's familiar with debuggers or any sort of debugging solutions, just in time, however, whatever you've got experience with, will notice some similarities here. So we do have a breakpoint swim lane. So you can click on any of these and create breakpoints. We will talk about that in just a second. You also have the ability to watch variables. So we can put in a response, and we'll see that populate in a second. We also have the ability to start, stop, and then do all of your debugging operations, your various steps that you need to do. If you want, you can also remove breakpoints, toggle breakpoints. I don't think I've ever had to use that, but you know, some different use cases may require that. So let's stop talking. Let's start working. We are going to start this debugger, and we are just going to run this as a process. So no breakpoints. We get all of the information. We get, again, we'll talk about span IDs when we get to open telemetry. This is some additional things that your gateways may or may not have, but you will see a request and a response, and then the local context variables that we created. So you'll see term 1 equals true, term 2 equals false. We have the request, which is the message that came through the browser to our gateway. So we can actually pull header values, we can pull information about the browser. There's a lot of things we can grab there. And then we also have the response. So the response, since we failed, is pretty boring right now. One thing I did want to point out is if your policy fails, the service debugger will tell you where it failed. So in this case, we can see quite easily in red font that assertion was falsified, number 8. So assertion number 8, again, this is why it's so important to have assertion numbers added into your policy manager as part of your preferences, just because it's so important. I'll show you where to do it again. So in the file, go down to preferences, and we always have comments and assertion numbers checked. So always important. If you want another spot or another way to do that, you can click in preferences from the main menu here, and it's going to be the same thing. So immediately we can see assertion number 8 failed. Go look at assertion number 8. Sure enough, term 2 is equal to true. We want this to be the case. So now we have to go back and look for term 2. Figure out that was false. Change it to true. So let's change this to true. We will start this debugger again. And now you see we've got the message policy completed successfully. Fantastic. We can also get a little bit more information about our response now. And this was the response that the gateway sends back to the browser. We've got a content type. This is what we specified in our return template response. And then the main part, which is going to be the body, true, true, true. So exactly what we are seeing here, exactly what we're expecting. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is on the debugger, the ability to put in breakpoints. So let's try this one more time. We know this is going to complete all the way. So I created a breakpoint just by clicking into this swim lane, hit start, started this process or started this request, and you'll see the browser is hanging. And that's because we have actually stopped the gateway at this specific assertion. So now we can come in, we can step in, and now we can see these these variables populate in real time and get information. You can see the span ID changed, here. We'll talk about OpenTelemetry, but we have all of this information in front of us now, to the point where we got the response. Fantastic. If we really want to pull a breakpoint at a specific assertion, we can use the toggle breakpoint button. Again, I don't use this very often. I find it's just easier just to click where I want to go. So here we can see we have the ability to create breakpoints, run through them, step into policies. Again, this is going to be real time. This is if the gateway is breaking or if a policy is broken immediately and is being impacted at the current time. So anything in the past, you will not be able to use the service debugger because the event has already happened. So something to be cognizant of while you're debugging policies. All right. Again, my name is John with Vista Sense Solutions. I want to thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments. Have a good night.